Peace and greetings, YouTubers. So I watched the Light Girls documentary on the OWN channel, and I have a few different opinions about it. Now, when I originally was trying to watch the documentary, I was watching it from an open-minded perspective, mainly because this documentary was supposed to tackle the other end of colorism, the side we don't hear about, the different effects that colorism has on women who are fair-skinned and light-skinned. And being that I am a man and I am not light-skinned, I was like, okay, I'm going to watch this and I'm going to be open-minded. This is going to be informative and teach me a bunch of different ways of viewing the world that I may not be able to see through because I see through a different lens because of my own experience and my own, physical features. So I'm like, okay, cool, I'm going to watch this. This is going to be great. But my issue with the documentary was that it was not very thorough, and it also came off as very divisive. And seeing that this was, I guess, supposed to be almost like a continuation of the Dark Girls documentary, it came off more so as a response, where it came off as, okay, well, that was y'all's struggle, but let me tell you about ours. And it became very divisive. Now, I'm not trying to say one struggle is bigger than the other, but I will say that the Light Girls documentary did not do a good job of shedding light on the issues that light-skinned women deal with. Okay, here's my thing. Because I recognize and I see that both light-skinned, brown-skinned, and darker-skinned women and men, we all deal with our issues within colorism. But the issue that I had with this documentary was that it did not do a good job of showcasing what lighter-skinned individuals deal with, and it did not do a good job of explaining the root. It kept showing the end result and the outcome and the long-term effects. So when we talk about the first 30 minutes, I didn't like the first 30 minutes of it because, oh, well, actually, I take that back. The first 30 minutes was fine. It was a bunch of different experiences that many light-skinned individuals or light-skinned women have had as children. Oh, I got beat up by the darker-skinned girl at school. Oh, everybody hated on me because I had long, pretty hair. Everybody was hating on me because of this. Nobody liked me. I didn't feel it. Okay, I perfectly understand that. And I was like, cool. Now that you brought that to light, now what I was wanting the documentary to do was to show us the root of that problem. And they didn't do that. So they much rather, it was kind of like, you put darker skinned girls in this category of just angry ass kids who hate themselves, that are insecure, and all they do is beat up the light skinned girls. And I'm like, I can believe that happened, but the issue is you have to talk about where the root of that problem exists. And what pissed me off is nowhere in this documentary was there a mention of basically white supremacy. And that's because people are afraid to say it on television. But when you look at the reality, any country on this planet where there's a population of brown people who have some sort of issue with colorism, they have all been colonized at some point by some European country, and that's where all that, that's where all the issues stem and root from, and that was not brought up in the documentary. So it's like you bring up the end result, because the end result is darker skinned girls beating up lighter skinned girls, or even on the flip side in the dark girls documentary, lighter skinned girls saying whatever they say to darker skinned girls. No one was talking about the root of the problem. The root was that European standards of beauty are the say-all be-all in how we should look. And because of that, and because that's been institutionalized, and that's now the way of doing things, that's why we're in the position that we're in. But instead of bringing light to that, it just went to the end result. So you turn on the documentary, and it's, oh, light-skinned girls are being attacked by these crazy dark-skinned girls. And then I also didn't like some of the people that they had featured in there because the wording was different. Like, this is a very, very sensitive subject for people to talk about within our community because it's something that we suffer from every day, and it's something that we have yet to get a grip on. So when you're having certain groups of people or certain individuals on this show giving their 2 cents about their experience and what they think, you have to be careful about the wording that they use. So one thing that caught me was the Hope Flood woman. She was a comedian, and she was talking about, oh, well, I was hanging or whatever, and, she was talking about, I guess, the girls that were bothering her, and, they were black and dark with short hair, and I was light and pretty. And I'm like, right there, your terminology and your wording is wrong. Just saying it that way comes off as, okay, there goes that, I guess, that light skin privilege that darker skinned people talk about. You can't try to explain a situation of how you've been disenfranchised, but the way that you're describing that story comes from a place of you being of a higher standard or of a privileged perception. So it or perspective. So it made it harder to empathize with her experience because I'm like, well, okay, excuse me, you light and pretty cool. I mean, I think everybody is cool looking, but damn. All right, so that kind of came off wrong with me, and I also didn't like there was one girl who was talking about, I guess she was on the phone and the guys were trying to knack to her, and she didn't hear when she was on the phone, but she kind of said, oh, and of course they were black. And it was kind of like, it just came off divisive to me. I really wish they would have really shed light on the fact that the reason why we have so many issues with colorism, and not just black people, I'm talking about Asians in Asia, I'm talking about people in South America, I'm talking about people in the Caribbean, people in Central America, people in basically anywhere where there's India, okay, all of these people who are having these issues with colorism, light and dark, it comes from being freaking colonized for hundreds and hundreds of years. You have centuries of basically generations being born into an ideology of thinking that tells you that a certain group of people are preferred over another. And those people have kids, and they have kids, and those kids have jobs and start corporations and start media companies, and then they showcase and forecast that all over the media. So when you go back to the first 30 minutes of the documentary, and you're talking about, I guess, these darker skinned girls who were beating up the lighter skinned girls, why do you think they're doing that? It's not because they just wake up and say, I hate you, you're light skinned. Let's talk about the imaging that's probably been pushed and force fed to them from their entire upbringing, okay? Because most likely the only time they've seen any images of themselves in the media is Lupita getting whooped over some soap in 12 Years a Slave. Other than that, and I guess maybe they can be Pam on Martin, you know, the best friend who Martin always calls ugly, and she has the bad breath, and even though she has a really great body and everything else, they call her the horse, you know, stuff like that. So I feel like if you're gonna bring out the end result of, you know, an oppressed group of people, you have to talk about what started it. So I fully empathize with every light-skinned girl who was talking about their issues, but I really wish the documentary would have brought to light where it originated from. And the same can be said for when you're talking about, I can't remember everything that happened in the Dark Rose documentary because it's been a minute, but I did remember when they did have the similar stories about, okay, the dark-skinned girls are talking about how they're being bullied or whatever, there was still a little bit of mention of where that comes from. So I wish they would have done that in this one, because what it did is, you open this can of worms, but you didn't address why that can of worms was there, and you just left it there, so then you look on Twitter and everybody cussing each other out. And then my other thing about it is, I really wish they would have talked about phenotypes. Because when we talk about light versus dark, we have this perception of, you know, lighter is more attractive, but I think that is to an extent, because you have to also look at the fact that depending on your physical traits, that may change. Like, I'm not trying to call out anybody, but I often see Tiny, T.I.'s wife, catch a lot of flack on how she looks. Now, she's light-skinned, and the issue is Tiny's features are different. Why? Because her features are not as European. Her nose is a little bit broader. She has fuller lips. I mean, she also had a stroke and things are different. But it's kind of like they should have talked about phenotypes and the differences, because it's not just about light skin. There's an issue with texture of hair. There's an issue with, you know, our lips, our noses, even the texture of our skin. Things like that, or even the shape of our body. So I think the whole light skin, dark skin thing, it's even bigger than just skin color, okay? Because there's a lot of, you know, I guess different groups of people who look certain different types of ways, and they may be considered not as attractive, even though they may be the right shade of brown, if you get what I'm saying. My other issue was, I think there was too many men that were given too many perspectives. This was supposed to be a documentary that was supposed to showcase to people like me the struggles of women, especially light-skinned women. But you had so many different men giving their input, and I'm like, I don't think it's our place to tell women about themselves and how they feel and why they feel the way they feel. I mean, I'm sure we can give our input, but at the end of the day, I feel like this was a documentary where people like, you know, me, I'm supposed to sit back and watch and learn, not be giving the input on you know, what's going on. I can't tell a woman how she feels and what, you know, why she's the way she is when it's something, you know, because at the end of the day, when you're also talking about colorism, you also have to remember this is still a man's world. And when you're talking about European standards of beauty, not only are you battling European standards of beauty, but you're also battling a male chauvinistic society where women are still objectified. So not only do you, as women, do women have to deal with colorism, they also have to deal with the fact that society is still built for them to have to basically create themselves around the personal desires and fantasies of men. So that could have been addressed. And I mean, they kind of addressed it, but they didn't do a great job of doing it. There was just a lot of commentary I wasn't a fan of. Like the guy that said the bit about the cars, where he was saying, well, the reason why I think light-skinned women are more, you know, attractive, it's kind of like, you know, it's kind of like cars. If you get like 100 gray cars and one red car, you know, the red car is going to stand out more. And I'm kind of like, that's more so proximity. That's just you being associated with what's familiar. But in my opinion, if that's the case, then there should be a massive infusion of people who are just extremely attracted to darker skinned women, since darker skinned women are not in the media as much as lighter skinned women. So it's kind of like that kind of contradicted itself. And To me, I feel like the latter half of this documentary basically confirmed everything that was said in the Dark Girls documentary, which is why I was not a fan of this documentary, because I really wanted it to be a documentary that would open my eyes to the struggles that lighter skinned women may have, or lighter skinned women have. I shouldn't say may, because that makes me sound like I'm judging. But I don't think it did that. And as a matter of fact, as the documentary continued on, it was like a continuation of Dark Girls, because now they're talking about, you know, the entertainment field and why darker women are not preferred as much and why this and why that. And it was like, by the time you got to the end of the documentary, I'm like, what did I actually learn? Because the documentary, the first 30 minutes was dealing with the light skin issue. I'm like, fine, okay, we're on that part. The rest of the documentary went any and everywhere and all over the place. So I don't know if I left this documentary actually learning something that I didn't already know. And I really think there should be somebody to give this type of documentary a retry, because I think there really are a lot of issues that lighter skin and fair skin women deal with, but I don't think this documentary did a great job of showcasing that, because even in this documentary, it went right back to how darker skinned women are disenfranchised as opposed to lighter skinned women. And I'm not saying lighter skinned women don't have their issues and don't have, you know, setbacks they fall into, because there's a lot, but I don't think it did a great job of bringing that up. I also wish the documentary would have done a comparison of just lighter skinned women and biracial women, because these are two different groups of women and sometimes they get put in the same category. And I feel like you could have talked about, or they could have talked about, you know, the different struggles that lighter skinned women have and biracial women have and how they get put in the same boat sometimes. They could have talked about, as far as interracial dating, there's a bunch of different elements in interracial dating that they didn't cover. I don't know. There's a lot that could have been said. So I wasn't a fan of this documentary, and I really wish I would have done a review on the Dark Girls one, but I wasn't even thinking about that when it came out at the time. So this documentary, I mean, it was okay, but if I were a white person looking from the outside in, I'd be like, oh, black people just all crazy. They just hate themselves and everything. And no, we're not crazy. It's just stuff that happened to us is crazy, and that's why we're in the position we're in now. So this documentary came off as very divisive to me. It wasn't something that came off as empowering to showcase that, hey, you have struggles, I have struggles, we struggle together, and that's what keeps us unified, because at the end of the day, we're working for a common goal and a common cause to make sure that we can uplift our community and make our community everything that it needs to be. This came off as more of a, oh, you were complaining because you were dark skinned, you thought you had tough, well, look what I got to deal with too. And then it just never went to the solutions. I mean, it was cool that you had the little girl singing at the end, but that didn't solve any of the problems at all. Like that, you can put the little cute factor on at the end of the documentary, but I don't know, it just, I don't know. So hopefully somebody does a redo of this type of documentary and does it in a way where it's really presented as an informative piece where you can actually learn something. Because I feel like this is a conversation that isn't, this conversation doesn't take place very often, because the focus is always on the darker and brown skinned women who deal with their issues and the lighter skinned women and biracial women. This isn't something that's brought up very often. So I really would like to see a different approach for this type of content, because I don't think they met their purpose. And just looking at Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, clearly a lot of people are kind of left in a gray area, like, well, what was I supposed to do with that? I got nothing. I feel like it just needed to stay focused on one direction. It jumped everywhere. And it's fine jumping everywhere, but every subject needs to lead into the next. And then when you lead into these subjects, you need to talk about the root and the cause and the solution, and then you lead to the end. But it was like, well, this happened, and that happened, and this is why that happened, and that happened, and oh, here's this random actress, and she didn't get a part because they said she wasn't quite black enough. And then, but then you don't talk about the discrepancies with blacks in acting in general. But anyway, that's my 2 cents. Share what you thought. Let me know. Yeah, really let me know what you thought about this documentary. Or am I just in over my head? And am I making this deeper than what it really needs to be? I'm out. Subscribe.